We just finished reading the acts of King Arthur and his loyal knights? Noble knights.
Nope.
Noble,
I assume we're
yes.
recording.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, so I'll edit out whatever we need to.
Beforehand
That's
stuff.
fine.
Woohoo!
Da, da, da. Um
Oh, nice.
I'm pretty sure,
On Steinbeck.
is it mirrored on your end? It's mirrored on my end. Like yours is fine, but
It,
like mine is mirrored.
yes, but I don't. It's fine. So yeah, I see yours straight, and I see mine reversed. So
Okay, alright. I wonder how that's gonna pick up. Anyway, okay, so yes, we read this, and then for April and May, we're reading East of Eden. Yeah, by John Steinbeck as well.
my little Steinbeck corner of my bookshelf
I
right
like it.
here.
I like it.
With
So, let's see. The Acts of King Arthur and his noble knights from the Winchester manuscripts of Thomas Mallory and other sources. So this is like John Steinbeck did like some research with his publishing pals and put together the manuscripts of the King Arthur stories. So I was doing some.
From what I understand, he really loved the stories when he was growing up, and it's what got him into reading. It's why he wanted to like
Okay,
do what he do. I watched a few like other people talking about this book
nice.
before when we were originally were planning to like have this discussion, so they're definitely not fresh in my mind. But that's what I was like gathered from people who did more research than we did. So.
So the thing that I noticed was that in the back, I didn't like whenever I was first looking at this book, I wish that I would have intended to read all the notes in the back because that's like letters that he sent to his publisher and his editor about the research that he was doing and how things were coming along. And I looked at it just long enough to gather an understanding that his associate Chase Horton um, got a letter from Steinbeck saying that things were coming along, but that he wasn't sure about the ending, and then he didn't get to finish his translation before he passed. So, I
Yeah,
guess.
I don't really. So, the way if I like to start talking about anything, then you want to discuss it in a particular order, we can be like, pause, Casey, we will get there. But when I was reading this, it definitely acts very much like a translation, which is really cool because I'm very familiar, like I think most people are, with the stories of King Arthur, but I've never really read a translated effort of it. I didn't go in expecting though that it was going to be a translation. I went in expecting like Steinbeck was going to spin it
Yeah.
and make it his own. And like you, when I was like reading but it was still so. Needless to say, the translation was still cool because I'd never really actually read anything like a translated work of from Old English, I believe, to
Yeah, yeah.
normal.
That was interesting.
So, but what I just wonder, because this was unfinished, and I did about the same as you did. Like I skimmed the letters, but I like wish I would have actually had time to read them all. But I wonder if that was his intention or if he was going to continue working and massaging it into something of his own. But like that's the thing we'll never know. So there's a lot of obviously potential for just imagining what could have happened with this if he was able to finish it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't Chase, it was the person who he refers to as ERO, which was one editor or publisher that he was working or I think it was an editor that he was working with. And the last letter that he sent her was July 8th, 1965, and it says, "I go struggling along with the matter of Arthur. I think I have something and am pretty excited about it, but I'm going to protect myself by not showing it to anybody so that after I get a stretch of it done, if it seems bad, I can simply destroy it. But right now, I don't think it is bad. Strange and different, but not bad." And I was like, no!
Why didn't he do it?
Why did you
So
do that?
yeah, so that's what I think is part of just a like interesting thing about reading this book is that You just don't really know what the final intention was, but you do get his take on at least a translation of the majority of the stories.
Right.
Which is interesting all on its own. So
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I read this for required reading in high school. First of all, I was in ninth grade, and I thought that it was an absolute crime that they could make me read bullcrap classics while I was on summer break. I was like real upset about it. And I finished it, and I looked at my mom, and I was like, "What? That's not an ending." And she goes, "Yeah, he never finished it." And I was like, "Why then? Why are we reading it?" And
probably so you can have deep philosophical discussions on like artist intent or something like that.
right, yeah, yeah. Well, so like I can say that I have more of an historical appreciation for it now. Um,
Yeah.
but as a child, I was like, "What? What?"
Well, the book I had to read for required reading before my freshman year was Great Expectations, and I hated it so much. So I feel you, like, and because of that, I just have a hard time reading anything else by this author. So I hope this remembrance and this nostalgia journey for you with this book and you kind of appreciating it more as an adult will help you to love East of Eden when we read that, because that's my favorite book to ever exist.
So I'm really excited about the fact that you said, because this is the only thing I've ever read by Steinbeck. So I think it's the only thing I've ever read by Steinbeck. Did he do Of Mice and Men?
Yes, he did.
Okay, so I've read Of Mice and Men.
I have a little orange hardcover boy. That's the most ridiculous, like, hardcover to ever exist.
it's like a hardcover children's book, but like for an adult. That's amazing.
It's only like 107 pages.
That's nice, man. See, can you believe I complained about having to read that when I was a sophomore? Like, come on. So I have read something else by Steinbeck, but this is what I think of when I think of John Steinbeck, and so I'm happy to hear that it's reads like a translation and not necessarily like how he writes things. It's got me more intrigued going into East of Eden, because I'm like, oh, okay, well then what's Steinbeck really got?
Oh yeah, so like I was initially, I did experience some letdown because I'm like, oh, it's just a translation. But then I was like, wait, I've never actually read a translation or attempted to read the original like text of this story, and it definitely was. It opened my eyes up to like what these Arthurian legends really are, so I kind of understand when there's like, because there's a lot of like retellings that are done, and I just am like, well, it's a retelling, but it turns out it like had pretty cool source material. I will say, just in terms of like book enjoyment, I enjoyed the latter stories much more than the beginning ones. They were much more slow at the beginning, and Merlin was just like, I am the best. And I'm like, go away, we know you died.
Right,
That's
yes.
not... He died.
Technically, he didn't die. Technically, he didn't die. He's just trapped. Because no one thinks to go get Merlin. Like, that was a thing. I was like, why is no one going to get Merlin? Like, he's in a cave somewhere. Somebody could figure, you can move the rock. Like,
enough people could go and move the rock and get Merlin out.
Right.
Also,
yeah.
you're correct.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would not take this, or even Of Mice and Men necessarily, as something that is really definitive of how Steinbeck actually writes. I know, I think he won the Nobel Prize for Of Mice and Men.
Yeah.
I'm cringing because I'm not sure if it was that book. He might have won it for Grapes of Wrath. I think it was Grapes of Wrath. I think it was Grapes of
Wrath, yeah.
A lot more sense. I was intending for this like Steinbeck read along for me to include, like, sneak in a reread of Grapes of Wrath. I have started it. I have not finished it. I've been way too busy. But I want to reread it this year just because I haven't read it since high school. But that was a book that was like, oh my god, I love the way this guy writes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go read his books. So I kind of feel the like high school, except for I had a good experience with Grapes of Wrath. You did not have a good experience with this book. But I will say for East of Eden, it's going to be very different than this, but like you do get to see some of the ways he uses just descriptive language in this book that are exponentially better in East.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I remember when I read this book, I was like, why does everyone love this guy? Like, I don't get it. It's boring. And like the thing is, oh, well, I had a question real quick before I get distracted by that. Does your version have the and this is the end of the book, so this is spoilers. This is really not a discussion you're going to be able to watch if you're looking for no spoilers on King Arthur. Like, I can't help you. I'm sorry.
For a book club event, read the book and then watch the video.
Right. Yeah. So then, does yours have like this old English down at the bottom of some of them?
Yes, I think so. Hold on, I'm trying to find the end of the Lancelot to see if there was one, and then check the one. Yes, it does. It's the
Okay.
Exclusive noble tale of Sir Lancelot du Lake. Then also and so that time Sir Lancelot, the greatest name of only knight in the whole world.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing that I find really fascinating about that is that he puts that in there, and it gives a lot of perspective for like how much of a labor of love this had to be, like translating that into what was modern day English in the 1960s, you know? Like, my God, he had to read manuscripts of Old English to get this
also cool that the foreword was done by Christopher Paolini, the guy that I think wrote Aragon and that other stars. That guy.
Yeah.
It's cool that he did the foreword, because if you're wanting to read this book to just get this, if you're trying to read this to get a Steinbeck version, like a retelling, I would not go into that assuming that. Mm-hmm. But if you want to just get a translated work of the King Arthur and his noble knights, like the tales and all of that, then this I think is very accurate, I can imagine, because he didn't have enough time to put his own spin on it, so to speak. He basically got translation, labor of love efforts. But I like that Christopher Paolini said he read the Caxton version of Sir Thomas Malory, so I assume he also read a translated, the one that I think Steinbeck read.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with this. I fell in love with that immortal book. I think that's just it's a good way to describe the tales and the mythology that this is, first of all.
Yeah.
And then Paulina was like, I wish I'd read this version, because it would have been like very easy to understand and it would have just been a very accessible way to access the stories, which I do.
Right. Yeah, I agree. That's fun. I like that your version has the Christopher Paolini foreword. This one just has the introduction from Steinbeck himself explaining why he wanted to pursue this, which I think is...
I think it's a very beautiful edition, though, of this book. Like, it's a nice hardcover. I just have the Penguins Classics Deluxe edition, which is very pretty. I like it.
Very pretty. I paid way too much for my Steinbeck books because I was like, oh, an opportunity to buy, like, older books. I'm gonna do that. I don't buy a lot of older books.
My friend still is borrowing my very pretty edition of East of Eden, but I found this at Half Price Books, and it's the cover that matches that one. And I think you actually sent me the math edition, but this is Tortilla Flat, which I haven't read, and then Oath, Mice and Men.
Yeah.
So I'll have to read Tortilla Flat as well soon.
Nice. Okay, so... Sorry, what?
So please bring me back.
So... I figured we just like try to tackle it in parts, because we talked about once before that these are not chapters, these are parts, these are like full stories. Yeah. So the first one was Merlin, where we get to see the fact that Merlin sets everything in place to begin with, like literally everything from Uther Pendragon fathering Arthur to, you know, Arthur's stepbrother being where he was at the time, and he just sort of like orchestrates all of this. And Merlin is an interesting character to me because he's so surrendered to fate that he's completely unwilling to take any agency at all.
That was definitely interesting, and I think it's part of of what pissed me off about his character is because he really was like, yeah, I know all these things are going to happen, and nothing anyone will do or I can do will change that. I'm like, you making the choice to not try and do anything about it to change it is what's actually cements what's gonna happen to you, bro.
Yeah. 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 So, and then one of the things that I remember so vividly with this read through was all the times that I was like, and no one cared what the woman had to say. Because like, you come,
Yes.
yes, and you come in with like Lady Igraine, and or that's how I pronounced her name, Queen Igraine, who was King Arthur's mother, like biological
Okay.
mother. Um, you know, she gets bamboozled by King Arthur or by Uther Pendragon, and then Uther Pendragon's just like, you know, now that you know the truth, I think that I'll just take you and make you my wife, and that's going to be a thing. And she's like, okay, and it's like, but no,
Bro. I think so, and obviously, I
obviously it's
won't
a
say
product
Stein,
of the times.
but I won't say Steinbeck's necessarily better about women in his other books. Well, he definitely is to certain in certain situations, but in some books that I've read, he very much is like the woman's just a side character. She's just
Yeah.
here for like. But at the same time, he times were very different still in the early 1900s when he did
Mm-hmm.
spend most of his life. But in this book, I thought it was very interesting that like all of the women were basically like that, were services for the men, and they kind of didn't have their own opinion or any power. And then there's Morgan, who very much had her power and like was this, but everyone's like, "Oh, you're crazy, you're a villain, you're evil."
Yeah,
Just,
she's
and I
evil.
think a lot of that stemmed from. I thought a lot of that initially, at least before she started like actually being evil, did stem from like, oh, she's actually speaking up for herself, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah,
So,
and then who was the I'm not gonna remember her name. But it's the lady who screws Merlin over, and like she's kind of chaotic neutral for a little while, and then she's like, "Oh wait, I love the king, so I'm gonna help him like in this one thing, and then I'm gonna be gone." And like she never comes up again, and it's like, well, where the fuck did she go? Like she's this all powerful sorcerer now, and then she's just
the
gone.
damsel on the lake,
Yeah,
the damsel, yeah,
yeah.
or,
I think that's who like Merlin falls for.
well, the death of Merlin part, and
Yeah.
he's like, Merlin knew what was happening to him and knew his fatal end, and still he could not help himself, for his heart doted on the damsel of the lake. Like,
Yes.
Burrow, you could have helped yourself, but also she had a cool thing and then disappeared and never came back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it was weird. It was weird. And then um it goes on and on about how Merlin delights in surprises. And like on the one hand, it's like, okay, I see how that could be because he sees the future. So when things surprise him, perhaps, you know, it is like genuine surprise. But also, you've seen that this changes, so again, why are you locked in a cave now? I don't get it. I don't get it. It's like he wanted to retire. He's like, I'm old as fuck and I want to retire, so I'm gonna let this bitch lock me in a cave. That's like the translation that I understood from the whole thing.
That would track, honestly. Like, you play like, my bones are weary, man. I just want to go take a nap, and if this is the best way to achieve that, we're gonna do it now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there was and then of course on that in that part we see I'm looking at my annotations here, which are kind of like all over the place. um
I did not do annotation, so you're one step ahead of me.
I did it in pencil, and I sat down to do it because I was like, oh, I need to write down my thoughts on this. What was the first annotation that I made? I'm pretty sure it was something like, why is yeah, my first annotation was, so Merlin is kind of a dick. And it was because he says, by my arts, I will cause her to believe that you are the Duke. And so it's like, oh, so you're going to set in motion all this deceit that's getting ready to, like, make things bad for most people.
For years, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, okay, so first of all, this character, Merlin, who, like, I idolized, sort of, like, because he was the wizard, you know, it's like, oh, Merlin's so cool because he's the wizard. Turns out he's an idiot. And, you know, this read through, I was like, oh, okay. So I need to annotate things because I have thoughts.
You have. I imagine I'll be annotating East of Eden for the first time when I read it, just because I've never done that. Considering I've read the book like 4 times, having no thoughts to write down is kind of wild. But also because I'll like be leading discussion, and there's a lot to talk about in that book. So
yeah, right, yeah. I'm expecting that. I don't think I'm gonna annotate this one because it's so old.
Let's get a notebook; it'll be fine.
Right, right. Or might do some like sticky pages or something.
Yeah.
But so then at the end of that, Merlin tells King Arthur that like he ended up sleeping with his sister and then had a son, and so King Arthur's plan for that is to do what that guy from Game of Thrones did, which was like have all the firstborn slain. And like, why is that a pattern that like monarchs fall into? Like, we've been doing this since ancient Egypt and we still haven't figured out that this is going to bring back a vengeful son. I don't, this is, it's repeating itself. And it's weird.
What my question that is like, what was the first recorded event of that actually occurring, and did they inspire each other? Because I know like
Right.
historically lots of things happened around the world simultaneously without like scientific discoveries and breakthroughs and just like cultural development happened simultaneously around the world without any actual like connection. So that's just an interesting like side tangent. Like, who did this first, or like was there like simultaneous like everybody's like all the men were like, oh, we're gonna kill all of the firstborns now,
Right.
and like no one learned from it all happen at the same time.
Yeah, so I thought that was very interesting that he was like, this is how I'm gonna fix it, and I was like, right. What was that?
Sure. Or it happened enough in history that people added it to literature.
Yeah, one of the two. Like, I don't know. I guess it's worth noting that, you know, the Pharaoh ordering the deaths of all the firstborn sons was like a biblical thing, and since this is all very biblically based, being that it's in medieval England, then perhaps maybe it was just it was a thing.
Bible or something.
Right, yeah. They did it in the Bible. That probably worked. So then... Okay, so then after we introduce ourselves to Merlin and all of the shenanigans that he is involved in, and the fact that he sets everything in motion for the entire book and then disappears like third part in, the Knight with the Two Swords I thought was a really... I think it might have been my favorite story of all of them, because
Knight
there
with
was...
Swords?
Yeah, and it was just because there was all this scandal around it. Yeah, yeah, and oh, I have a thing in here that says somebody's shit talking Arthur. Hold on. Only a clean and unstained knight may draw it, and must be of noble blood on both his mother's and his father's side. Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought that was so scandalous. But yeah, Balin was his name. And I can't remember why he was the Knight of Two Swords. I also... There's a theme with, like, hysterical women running themselves through with swords or getting their heads lopped off by knights that are just swinging their swords around all willy-nilly. I noticed that was like a running theme through all of it. It's like, oh, woman entered on stage left, she's getting ready to lose her head, or she's gonna stab herself with a sword.
Options, both equally probably painful and deadly.
And deadly. Definitely deadly. If not that, then the gangrene. But I'm trying to remember why he had the two swords. And then...
To the part where she fell on her sword. on her lover's sword. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right? Yeah, and then it's like, oh, you're gonna make it sound all like innuendo, and then she's dead. uh,
See, has two swords. Okay, I found the two swords. Hold on.
okay.
Uh, so I don't know how he got the two
You
swords,
see that he wears two
but
swords. I liked that there were. This book also solidified for me that it is, this read through solidified that it is in fact fantasy. You know, they talk about dwarves and the dragons and the things, and it's like, oh, okay, so this is fantasy. It just happens to be wrapped up in the average man's like expectations in this world.
I think a lot of people, especially who read like only modern fantasy, fail to like understand where the actual roots of fantasy were, which were definitely like Arthurian legends, and also like a lot of the Greek and ancient mythology in general from multiple cultures. That's a lot of the magical elements from that helped shape the fantasy genre that we see today. So
Yeah.
people are like, oh, so like the Odyssey is not fantasy. I'm like, well, it kind of could be if you like, or it's inspired fantasy that came after it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And this
and
is clear.
that's clearly what.
And King Arthur, the myths and lore of King Arthur is not an exception to that. It's also original fantasy, basically.
Yes. So he kills the king of Ireland, and then he kills her lover by accident or something.
And then he has two swords.
And then he has
This is
two
about what
swords. Was that
like,
it? That he has to like carry that sword because yeah, and then of course Merlin's in here stirring the pot. In punishment for the death, you are destined to strike the saddest blow since the lance pierced the side of Lord Jesus Christ. Wow.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's a hell of a
Dramatic
yeah.
reckoning. So I think Lala killed that one of Arthur's knights, which is where he got the sword, and then the knight that he kills lover killed herself on the sword, and now he's carrying the two swords. And Merlin told the whole like, "You will now commit the saddest thing since Jesus is lancing on his side." So I think he got the sword and had to carry the sword because he killed one of King Arthur's knights by accident or something.
See, as I was glancing through, I thought that might have been the case, but then I also thought it was something like he had a knight. He was like a knight for King Arthur, and then he ended up. Oh, was it that he killed the Lady of the Lake? Was he the dude that killed the Lady of the Lake?
No, because she comes back in the Death of Merlin chapter.
She's the daughter of the lake or something, isn't she? Or the
He might like, I don't know. Killed some people, has some swords, is destined for a depressing fate.
Yeah, well, and I think the thing that ended up getting me with that story was it actually comes later, and it's not actually the knight with the two swords, but it's the two brothers, the Balin and Balon, or Balin and Balin, however, and they end up killing each other later, which ends up being kind of tragic.
Yes, there's a lot of tragedy in this show.
So then, what did you think of the next part, the wedding of King Arthur?
Okay, let's see if I remember what happened in this part. Guinevere's involved, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I remember more of like the wedding. Like I honestly I wasn't too excited by the wedding. It honestly seemed more like I'm here for the knights and the fighting and the quests and things. This seems like unnecessary
Right.
chaptering, but I don't know. I'm trying to see if anything came out of this. Oh, there was a joust that was demanded.
I know.
That's towards the end, I think. Some guy named Sir Torre.
Oh yeah, Sir Tor and King Pelennor. Which Sir Tor comes in later. He ends up being that guy that Lancelot goes up against towards the end of the
Mm-hmm.
book.
Yes. So I wasn't. Um, I honestly
Oh,
don't remember the section very much, but
he
one
sent.
of yours there.
So he sent um, Gawain, and then Sir Tor and King Pelennor off on like quests for Guinevere, and then yeah, I don't really remember. There was a lot of testosterone in the, in this part in particular. Uh, and then I remember, here it is. I wrote at the end because somebody's like, Merlin tells somebody that he's cursed to like not know his child, or like he's gonna get killed by, there's some nefariousness involved in his child. And I was like, well, these knights might know who their babies are if they stop like raping every woman they come across because it's their nightly duty or whatever.
Oh boy. Oh,
um
to be a female back in the day would have been rough. It still is definitely rough, but like would have been worse.
yeah.
And then it's the death of Merlin.
Yes, which
We discussed a
Merlin,
little bit.
Merlin. Oh, there we go. Okay, I was like, this isn't the Merlin chapter. Um, yes.
I did like that Arthur asked him, like, you are the wisest man alive. You know what is coming. Why do you not make a plan to save yourself? He's like, well, I can't.
Yeah, it's already
Fatalist.
foretold. Okay, so Galahad becomes Lancelot. We find that out in this part. Um, oh, and then Nynaeve was the lady of the.
Nineveh, whose name is
Yeah.
like, relatively similar to the one of the females in the Wheel of Time.
Oh yeah,
Nynaeve.
Nynaeve. Yeah.
Nynaeve. So there's an extra an in the middle of the name for the girl in the Wheel of Time.
Oh, nice. I wonder if that's like a tribute of sorts.
Homage thing, something interesting. I didn't notice that till right now. So yeah, Nynaeve. Nynaeve.
I also wondered. I found myself wondering in this chapter, like, how old is old in this, because Merlin's considered to be very old and very wise, and it's like, okay, but like mortality rates are not necessarily the best, right? So like,
He
how old
was
is
like,
old?
I think a good way to imagine is if there was any age descriptors given in like the Uther Pendragon marriage zone beginning of the story, because he's at least it was probably like at least middle age there, and now Arthur's an adult.
Right.
Arthur didn't exist, so
Right.
I would say he's definitely pushing like mortality rates.
Yeah.
He's not like just an ancient being or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they talk about how young Nynaeve is, and I was like, Merlin is a dirty old man. Like, he's pursuing this person who's like probably like 18 because she's, marriable, but she's like
Remember, it was
older.
the middle.
What is it?
What I said, she could have been younger. It is the Middle Ages.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, this is a dirty old man. I'm kind of glad she shoved him behind a rock. Um,
For sure.
Give me just a second. I gotta go run and grab my power cord.
No worries. I hope she's gonna edit this out. case she doesn't, though, Travels with Charlie is a really fun book to read. I recommend it a lot. Basically, John Steinbeck and his dog in a truck driving from New York across to California and down to Texas and back, I think, or it's a little downward U, but oh.
What are you doing?
I was like, yeah, it's this out, but in case he doesn't, this is another good Steinbeck book to read.
I thought of something while I was up, and it's going to require like a split-second backtrack to the... I want this to go away. Okay. To King Arthur's marriage. And that is that whenever he marries Guinevere and he sends those 3 knights out on quest, he does it... I can't remember his reasoning for it because it's some arbitrary testosterone-fueled medieval thing. But he was starting to like set the standard for knighthood at that point, because up until then it wasn't required that you be honorable or anything like that to be a knight. Like it was this supposed holy appointment.
I think.
Appointment? When I think appointment, I think calendar. But yes, appointment. And that's when he starts to I feel like that's when the seeds was planted for like, okay, we need rules for these people who are just gallivanting across the country.
Morals
crazy.
And sometimes people need rules to have morals.
Right, yeah, like rules drive morality, as it turns out.
I think there's so many religions. But that was a joke. But also.
Okay, so then we have the death of Merlin, which I think is funny that it's called a death because he didn't technically die. We didn't see him die. But then they start gathering the Knights of the Round Table.
There was less sitting at a round table than I expected there to be.
Right. Like, how many times were they even all at the same table?
No idea. Not much in this adaptation or translation.
So then the next part is Morgan Le Fay, which I was a lot more excited to read about than I should have been, because she didn't start her badassery until like later when she started messing with Lancelot.
She was kind of just a petty sibling at this point in this chapter.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it was interesting that they that it says in a nunnery she studied necromancy, and I was like, how though, and why? Because I don't get it.
How what normally goes on in a nunnery turns out.
Yeah, so I thought that was weird. And then like she has this guy that she's like married to or something, you know, like she has someone she's like in tryst with, but then she's just kind of using him to get at King Arthur. And isn't this the chapter where she puts everybody to sleep?
I think so, yes.
Hatred was her passion and destruction was her pleasure. Tattoo worthy. And I wrote, because obviously women are either heinous or damsels in distress. There's no middle ground.
Unfortunately, no. You have to assume that's something that was due to the time that this was written, but...
Yeah, well, and like... I mean, women with power can be scary whenever you're a dude who's...
not wanting that.
Yeah, or like, how did they put it? Canceled his conscience with his lust. If your conscience can be canceled with your lust, then women are some devious motherfuckers, I guess.
I guess.
Oh, yes. Okay, so Nynaeve had watched the combat, hoping for the decision of God against the treason of Morgan Le Fay. And I didn't understand that either, because she's someone who uses sorcery and necromancy, which is supposed to be against God. So why is she waiting for the like you're riding the fence. And I don't think it's gonna work.
She like she basically quote unquote killed or trapped the other like good sorcerer person.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, very symbolic, probably like with religious allegories thrown all in there about
Probably.
Merlin versus like of the light versus the dark, which is Morgan Le Fay. So it's she Lady of the Lake, 90 or whatever her name is
Mm-hmm.
definitely toeing that line.
Yeah.
She probably crossed the line to the dark side when she put Merlin behind the rock, but now she's like, oh, Morgan's really scary, and I don't know if I want to deal with her.
Right. Right. You, King Arthur, big strong man, take care of that woman.
She'd be scary. So,
So, uh, Gawain, Ewain, and Marhalt. This was the one where they went out with the three ladies. And I think this was a very good one too.
I basically, honestly, after Merlin was behind his rock, I enjoyed them more.
Well, because he takes putting him behind the rock made it to where he wasn't spoiling what was going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's like Merlin, shut up.
That's what the story's gonna be. Let us experience it.
Yes, yes. Oh, first annotation I made in this one was Morgan Le Fay should be burned. Date compared to other witch trials, which I guess is probably far away, but
Mm-hmm.
there.
Room and anger back to Camelot. That's the first sentence of the book, just in case anyone else wants to know where they're at.
Yeah, yeah, they're unhappy in Camelot.
For sure.
Oh, yes. So then he
The
sends
one was
out,
long to get through
huh?
because I was like, oh, I thought this was. There's a bunch of like short sections, and then this one was super long.
It was
And
very
then the rest of
long.
this one was long, and then Lancelot was the rest of the book.
Right? Yes. I thought it was so funny. Okay, so the three ladies, right? So we have Gawain, who was like super full of himself, and he got paired up with like the younger lady, didn't he?
I think so, if I remember correctly.
And then she just like runs off with some other knight in the middle of his quest.
Mm,
Dragons can see in the dark like cats.
but yeah, I did enjoy this one. It was just kind of I liked the whole questing action and forward motion and just like
Things were actually
fun things.
happening.
Things are happening and people are doing things and jousting and fighting and dying. Honestly, but um, I did enjoy that, and I wasn't very aware of those stories at all. Like I think everybody's most probably familiar with the story of Lancelot.
Mm-hmm.
Of any of the like Sword from the Stone, which happened at the beginning. But I didn't know about this story, and it was packed full of activity, and it was I definitely laughed out loud at some parts. I don't remember which parts because I didn't annotate, but but it was funny, and it happened, and it was honestly very refreshing after like Merlin spoiling the story, Merlin spoiling the story, Merlin spoiling the story.
And he spoiled it again. Yeah, so so Gawain gets paired up with the younger lady, and then they go off on quests, and then she ends up leaving with some other knight because Gawain's just like full of himself. And I underlined this part because I was just so taken aback. He says about her after she's gone. It may sound ungallant, but I'm glad she is gone. I drew her by lot. A silly country girl, pretty now, but the kind that runs to fat. And it was like, you, what? What? That's so rude. Like, really?
So rude.
Yeah, and I wrote this fucking guy. Like, I don't even know what to do with you at that point.
He was very full of himself. We did know that getting into that part.
Yeah, and then wasn't he... He was somehow... He and Owain... Owain is Morgan Le Fay's son? I think?
Believe so. I think Owain is Morgan Le Fay's son.
Yeah. So... Then... After he goes off and... My annotation for this one says, and that's how Gawain proved he was a dick. Oh yeah, because he tricked that knight, and then he slept with the knight's girlfriend, and like went off with her for a few days, and then ended up. He's just like his whole story.
To play up.
Yeah,
Cool.
felt like watching bad TV.
Medieval style.
Medieval style. Mad TV. Well, and then oh yes, and then Nynaeve actually ends up coming in and helping Peleus turn back against his lady. Like, she had not wanted him, and then whenever Gawain slept with her, she was like, oh. And then Nynaeve comes by, and she's like, hey, Peleus, let me make you a lot more desirable to this girl. And then the girl was like, oh, Peleus, you're so great. And then he was like, nah, I'm good. Like, damn. Nynaeve's helping people serve up some salt.
Yes. Yeah. She did a. She was actually like I think one of the bigger female characters because she was in multiple parts and had like speaking lines and actually made advanced or destroyed plot depending on your perspective.
Yeah,
she made things happen.
She's
like I'm not gonna wait for you.
What is that? What is that rule where it's like two women have to have more than 3 lines not talking about men or something in things to make it past this particular test? I don't know. I don't remember what it's called.
For life.
She gets it pretty close to that. But not quite. And then Maralt ends up going off and slaying a giant who I didn't notice until this read through had a baby. The giant, intent on his baby son, did not hear Maralt approaching. And it's like, oh, he's just gonna go kill this giant real casually as he's paying attention to his baby. That's cool.
Have like a parent in the back. Jeez.
What? Yeah, man. Oh yeah, and then he's the one who ends up with the middle-aged lady, and then
is he the one that has to like marry the old lady who turns young or something like that? Or I forgot who that was.
So like Maralt ends up
the
with
hag.
the middle woman, and then she makes things comfortable for him, and then they end up getting too comfortable, so then she ends up like nitpicking him because he like won't pick his pants up off the floor. And then he takes her back to the forest because he's like, I don't even want to anymore. And then by the time he gets back to the forest, he's like, maybe we could try this again. And she's like, nah, I'm good. You go on your way. Yes. And then the end of it is this other knight coming by, and then Maralt telling him like, "Hey, there's a chick up there. She'll take you on quest." And he says, "What is her name, sir?" And then Maralt is like, "I never thought to ask." And it's like, "Of course you didn't. Who would have?"
Oh, right. Why would her name be important at all?
um, See, this is something that confuses me because then we go with Ewain, who um, trains with the older woman, and then she teaches him to be like the super good knight. But didn't we read at the beginning, like at the start of this discussion, that Lancelot's given name was Galahad?
You mentioned that earlier, but we didn't talk about that. I don't remember, but I can Google that real quick.
Okay, because I'm confused about it because, like, Merlin announces him as having had a different name, but he'll be named as Lancelot or something. But then Owain ends up being Lancelot because he's
Lancelot's original name, but it was changed to Lancelot when he was a child.
okay. So then I don't know why Owain, because he ends up being Lancelot though. He's the one who rides with the older knight, and she teaches him how to ride in the horse differently, which is one of the things that Lancelot mentions in his story that people can identify him by because he rides in his horse differently than other people do.
I didn't read Owain as Lancelot. I read them as different people. That might have been just a connection I didn't make. That would be interesting if they were actually the same person. I missed that connection definitely when I was reading it. I was like, okay, we're at Lancelot. Here's another one of the knights at the round table they don't ever sit at.
No round table for you, Casey. None. Oh my god. My tilt yard is the womb of knights. That's crazy. Okay. Um
Wayne Action Galahad, yes, let's ask that. Um, what is the name of sword? Oh, that's sword. They're not the same person.
so then
Might have been a sword that was transferred between Owain and Galahad. But it's not clear on the Google immediately.
see, I'm trying desperately to figure out um why I made that jump.
I need to stand up real quick. My legs are cramping. I will be right back because I am sitting on the floor.
Okay.
Look at this. I'm back. I have returned.
I don't know why I've made this jump, but I swear to God there's logic behind it.
Probably the horse riding thing. So maybe Owain was trying to pass himself off as Lancelot slash Galahad.
Maybe. Hmm. I like how at the end of this they're like, and each prepared his tale as he would have it told and repeated down the ages. It's like, decide your own legacy, do you?
That's what it sounds like. He might have been trying to like be remembered or something, or be disguised as Galahad, so to speak.
So I know that Egwene is Morgan Le Fay's son. That gets alluded to a lot in this part.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, something that popped up in this part of the story that I thought was interesting was the develop. It looked to me like it was the development of a bow, like either a bow and arrow or a crossbow, maybe. Because they started talking about how, this will be the end of knighthood. You give me one archer and he can fell 8 knights.
Yeah, that was interesting to kind of just, excuse me, illustrate like the changing of times.
Yeah. Good
Development
fairies.
of technology. It did have a page bookmarked, which is, I guess, the closest thing to annotating, and for whenever we get to the Lancelot section. I had a thought on that, really. It's a very nice quote on my page 291. So.
If low-born men could stand up to those born to rule, religion, government, the whole world would fall to pieces. It's like the big concern that they end up having there.
Oh, the bow and arrow.
Yeah. It was like, man, priorities. Okay, I don't know why I made that connection. It does make me wonder, though, because I could have sworn. I don't know. Maybe on my next reread, that'll be something.
Did you get those trees covered?
No, I didn't.
Add that in your.
I'm sorry.
Your,
I'll go do it now.
No, it's done.
Oh, thank you. You think you do? Try to set me up.
Well, and you said you were going to do it.
I know. I'm sorry. Okay, so then.
Put it in your little YouTube description area, so that way you can let people know.
What is it?
We figure out if Egwene is actually Lancelot. You'll just have to include it in the YouTube description.
Yeah, or maybe record a little piece to tack on in here somewhere. Okay, so then the last part with our dear Lancelot, who I almost wish that I could have read Lancelot's chapter part with the same kind of naivety that I had in high school, because again, there's so many things that he says that I'm like, you are an asshole.
Oh, for sure. I did like his story just generally, though, because he's trying to live up to the expectation of knighthood, and he's one of the last quote unquote great knights, and he's trying to develop this almost this training regiment called questing, and these tasks for people to go try and achieve to work on training. And he does have some innocence in him, but I will agree with you. He's not all nice and shiny and all that, but
I do think that he spoke to the humanity of it, because he was he tried for perfection more than any of the other knights did, and then in the end he still fell short because of his own passions, oh, I don't want to get too far what?
Sorry, what was that?
I was going to say, I don't want to get too far into a Stormlight Archive rant, but I did make a couple of connections with some of the things that Sanderson wrote in Stormlight Archive, and this one in particular. I feel like Adolin said something along the lines of, nothing rusts so quickly as an unused sword or an idle soldier. And I was like, I swear to God, one of the Cullens said that. I know they did. I remember this.
That's an awesome, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So I think my favorite part of this chapter, clearly the one I remember the most at this point, is when he's talking to Sir Kay, I believe. It's pretty, I think it's towards the end of the section.
Yes, his whole thing with Sir Kay is brilliant.
Yeah, I think This is a monologue from Sir Kay, actually. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but on mine it's page 291, but it's the only thing I like actually bookmarked, like there's a folded page there. And it's so hard that it will smash a hammer and be worn away by little grains of moving sand, and a heart that will not break under the great blows of fate can be eroded by the nibbling of numbers, the creeping of days, the numbing of treachery, of littleness, of important littleness, so on and so forth. It's a whole like monologue. It's literally like the whole page. Yeah. I know you know, but I'm talking to the like I like that whole sentiment, and it really well, the monologue itself was just important because it's like, I think we're so tough against a big thing, but it's lots of little things that really like will get us down or like erode or even make change. Like lots of little people working together doing small things can still make a change. So I liked that whole section.
I did too. Yeah, I liked Kay's take on things because like you said, he puts it in this way of like, as long as we're seeking honor and we're out doing these things and we're being knights, then we can do that and we feel good about it. But then he's always stuck at the castle, getting the feasts together, making sure that everybody has enough food, making sure the wine doesn't run out. And King Arthur, being King Arthur, is always like, yes, more, get it, make them happy, feed them all. And Kay's like, but the numbers don't work, man. They just don't work. Yeah, I really liked that.
Lancelot's story was that whole interaction, but I also did like the whole like, well, I guess I need to go figure out what my quest is going to be. And he's like, well, I guess I'll just start walking and see what happens.
Right? Yeah. So I liked his little adventure with Lionel, Sir Lionel, his nephew. One of the things I really liked about it was, first of all, they started it out by going to the church and like becoming shriven. I don't know what that means, but I took it to mean something along the lines of like going for confessional, making sure that your soul is pure. And he says, a knight must be as ready and prepared for his death as for his enemies. So it's like, oh wow, okay, so you're going to the church to like purge yourself so that in case you die, you don't go to hell.
Still good.
Right. Take care of all that pesky stuff you've been doing in between now and your last quest.
Yeah.
That
was.
And then whenever Lionel mentions Guinevere and how like he's trying to ask Lancelot like, why do you love a woman who can't love you back and all these things, and you see this really dark side of Lancelot come out for a second, and I was like, oh, I didn't notice that before. He gets real like scary for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ends up being the fact that Lancelot doesn't act on that makes Lionel respect him. And I was kind of like, okay, alright, I can get behind that.
Yes, I did like that whole exchange as well. And there's nothing like a little unrequited love to spice up a story.
God, man. And the thing is, like, you get to the end of it and you realize that it's not necessarily unrequited. And it's like, ooh, your honor, bro. Your honor. It's gone.
Like makes the right choice to be respectful in that situation, which I do therefore respect his character for. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and he's, like I said, he tries very hard to maintain what everyone else seems to think of him. You know, like he tries very hard to be the best person that he can possibly be. And I do really like that you see the fact that he's imperfect. Because it makes a better hero, I think.
Yeah. Sure. Well-rounded characters invoke more emotion in the readers. They like are more relatable because like not everybody is like perfect 100% of the time. Yes. And you're not going to relate to them as a reader. And I imagine the original guy when he wrote this was like inspire or just like entertain others, and people are not going to want to read someone who's perfect when they're like, yeah, I can't be you. You're too good at life.
Yeah.
This is a real bummer.
I thought it was interesting that they pointed out that Guinevere looks like Queen Elaine, who is, I guess, Lancelot's mom. Or the person who took care of him, maybe? Which automatically disproves that whole Owain being Lancelot thing. Right? Because Owain's mom is Morgan Le Fay. I don't know, man. All these trees get weird in medieval times.
They crisscross, they cross the streams a little too often for me to really know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, was it Odysseus? Where they all get real... It all gets real weird. But yeah, they pointed out that Guinevere resembles his mother, and it was like, that's Freudian if I've never heard it before, you know? And it's weird to see that association before Freud was a thing.
Well, the original Greek mythology, I think, came first with like the whole
Right.
Oedipus complex and everything. So,
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So then was it Oedipus who did all the sleeping with sisters and?
well, it was the like mother thing that like he killed his father and then married his mother.
Okay.
To marry his mother, and I think her daughter ended up with like him or something like sick. Look, it was gross. I haven't read that since high school. I'm actually wanting to read Antigone like soon, and it's in the same book. It's like Antigone, Oedipus, the King, and somebody else. So I'm gonna like reread it and be like, do I have this straight in my head? But I think that's how it goes.
Okay. 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 So I'm flipping through and seeing where I made notes and things.
Very good.
And one of the things that Lancelot says that he likes about Guinevere that he could never like about Morgan Le Fay or any of her other little witchy friends that are there trying to convince him to be, you know, dubious. And he says, a face, a body grows and suffers with its possessor. It has the scars and ravages of pain and defeat, but also it has the shining of courage and love. And to me, at least, beauty is a continuation of all of those. But Morgan Le Fay and all her friends are like putting on this fake, like facade, this magical facade, you know. And he's like, but you don't look like a real woman. And that was kind of like, oh, okay. Pitter patter, you know.
Yeah,
Look
you
at
gotta
Lancelot,
look
sweet.
London to be real. So
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I really liked about this part is that when he decides to take Kay's armor and like pretend to be Kay for a little while, and how short-lived that was. I loved how so soon everybody was like, that's not Kay. There's no way.
you can't. You have to like really. You have to like really be able to become the person. And he's like, I'll put on your armor, but like I'm gonna still be me. And then it was like, nah, we can kill you, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I see right through you. I thought that was really fun though. And to see people be so rude whenever they thought it was Kay, and then whenever they figure out it's Lancelot, they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Like I'm so sorry." And I had to wonder, like, is that sort of like the medieval equivalent of a mafia backing, like having Lancelot come and be like, "Listen, you're gonna leave Kay alone because I said so."
I mean, it's politics.
I mean,
What?
sounds like it would apply.
My husband was just like, that is how politics works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Got anything else for this section? Before we, I'm at my like ready for final thoughts part, just because I.
Okay. I'm sorry. I feel like I've just been rambling this whole time.
You're good. I didn't take as good a note, so it's my fault that I don't have more thoughts because it's been like a little bit. So no, but yeah, you're reminding me of things that I have an opinion on as well after you say them. So.
Okay. So there was one other big thing, because just to like, conclude for purposes of concluding, Lancelot at the end of this ends up like getting hot and heavy with Guinevere for a little bit before running away and weeping. But it comes about because Lancelot ends up I was not clear on whether Lancelot or Guinevere created the sorcery that happened that led to them coming together, because as she's leaving the room, he kind of sees, like, in this out of body experience sort of way, himself following her. And then whenever they meet up in the hallway, she's like, I saw you, you were here, you said goodnight to me. And he was like, that wasn't me. And then they
get hot and heavy for a second.
Yeah.
But so I think it might have just, I honestly don't know if like someone caused that or if one of them did, but I thought it was an interesting touch, like that there was still like little sprinkle dust of magic in the story.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't, if there wasn't like necromancy involved.
Yeah, so I had to wonder about that. I was like, I wonder if that's like just sort of like the magic of the universe, I guess, of their... Yeah, like putting them together in a way. The power of manifestation, I guess. I was like, that's really weird. But then the other thing was that they imply that pagans invented zero.
Well, I assume they mean the Islamic folk from the Middle East or Egypt, because I think it was Egyptians that, the number zero was first like a word that existed in Arabic, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Because I had no background on that, and whenever I came across it, it was like, what? The pagans? What?
Yeah, there was no concept of nothing.
Huh?
There was no concept of nothing before paganism.
No concept of nothing before paganism, Lucas says. Yeah, they say... Go ahead.
Zero originated to like somewhere in the Middle East, but doesn't say who. But I think it was actually first recorded zero was the Mayas, Mesopotamia region, and then the Mayas.
Yeah. Okay.
I might be wrong, but I thought, the people in Northern Africa invented algebra and a lot of the words like that, because when they translate into Spanish, they have the Arabic roots. I know that's a weird way for me to get to that conclusion.
No, it's okay. That, the etymology works. But yeah, I thought that was weird. They say the pagan has invented a number which is nothing not written like an O, and I was like, what the fuck is that? And just, this is also another thing randomly that I'm adding in here. Where is the unicorn's horn to test the king's wine? I thought that was so weird. I was like,
what? Unexpected. I'm like, wait, what?
What an extremely rare thing to have in order to test the king's wine. Maybe we should have a thing that's not a unicorn's horn that can tell us whether or not the wine is good.
Or why haven't we seen any unicorns if all of a sudden there's a unicorn horn?
Yes. So
there's multiple logical fallacies here.
Okay, so then closing thoughts for you.
So again, I went in, like I said earlier, expecting something very different, but I was still happy with what I read once I came to terms with that. It took me a second, and that's part of the reason I really didn't like the beginning, because I'm like, this is not like Steinbeck's writing, this is just like a translation. But then I was like, okay, maybe I'm cool with the translation. So I think overall I did really enjoy it, and I've never gotten to really immerse myself in the stories this way before. I've the Disney adaptation that's animated with King Arthur, and I've seen a few other little movies and a few non-animated movies, and just like it exists in media that I've seen before. But this was like I really felt like I was connecting with the original story, which was definitely really cool. And I've been more into like reading the source material recently for stories that tellings. So I really did enjoy it. It just took me a minute to get there, and I kind of was coming to terms with that around when Merlin was no longer there, which is why I think I fully enjoyed both sections,
Yeah.
or like the later in the book more. Oh no,
Merlin is coming at you. Coming out of that cave.
Out of that cave to diss me right now. But yeah, no, so overall I thought it was a very good translation. I wouldn't go into this like expecting it to be more than that really. But I do like to also toy with the idea that like we don't know what Steinbeck actually wanted this to be when it was done because it was not done.
Yeah.
It was apparently a fairly early draft. But so moral of the story is I did enjoy reading it. Unexpected, but like once I like came to terms with that, I the first half, like the first few sections, I was like, this is boring and not what I wanted. But like the rest of it was like, oh, I actually like this. So I've averaged myself at like a 3-star rating.
Okay, I was gonna ask if you had given it a star rating yet. I haven't put it through my Cawpile stuff yet, which I need to do for a lot of books. So we'll see if I actually get to doing that this year. But yeah, I think when I read it when I was younger, it was definitely like I would have DNF'd it if I didn't have to write a journal on it. But as an adult, as much as the misogyny killed me, and as much as like the product of the times thing just like grated on me sometimes, I think I did like it. I didn't love it.
Yeah.
It was dry. But the parts that weren't dry were like, oh, something's happening. It's like, you get 3 pages like this, and then the rest of the time it's like, okay, when's the next fight gonna happen?
Yes, exactly.
And the actual fights, not the jousting, because the jousting didn't count, even though apparently a joust is a fight to the death, which I didn't know either, and I don't know how they kept knights around, like...
My familiarity with jousting is from the movie adaptation A Knight's Tale that's loosely adapted from the Canterbury Tales A Knight's Tale, but that's all, and they didn't go to the death in that, so
yeah my experience with jousting up until this point was the medieval times like tourist attractions.
Yeah, those are fun.
I had fun with them, and I just never thought about jousting very much until this book, and then I was like, why are people like super gung-ho about going and jousting? It's like, I'm gonna fight you to the death, even though it's might gonna be me.
I don't know. I guess people were just like, if I live to be too old, then I have a whole new set of issues that I don't want to deal with because there's not medicine and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think reading this book more than anything made me want to find retellings of Morgan Le Fay.
Yes.
Because she ended up being ultimately like my favorite character, because at least she was consistent. And yes, Lancelot was consistent too. He's my favorite male protagonist, and then Morgan Le Fay is my favorite female character for, the lack of all of them that there were, but she was really great because at least they were both consistent.
Yeah, I think they were definitely the 2 most built out characters. Because honestly, like I know Arthur's the main character in the book, but like you really don't see that much of him like getting to make his own decisions. He's just kind of there for the plot of everybody else. So.
Right, yeah, it's like he and Merlin were the setup so that we could see what happened to all these other knights.
Yes, exactly.
Which is weird.
I am curious because, again, this is my first dalliance into actual nearly source material on the Legends of King Arthur. Are there other knights we missed? There probably are. I'm not going to go out and try and trying to translate it or even begin to think about reading the like original guy from the thing. Because I'm like, it's probably going to be a lot like this, and I don't know that I would pick this up just for fun. But
So you
I might
don't
just try.
want me to send you a Sir Thomas Mallory version of King Arthur?
Nah, it's for Thomas Mallory. No, I might go watch some videos on YouTube.
There you go.
Some
That's good.
along the line, like the Green Brothers and their like little education zone. Like the
Yeah.
funny. I want the fun version.
Yes, yes. Cool, cool. So yeah, I think for me it probably landed at a 3. I wouldn't necessarily call it a solid 3 because there was just a lot in it that I couldn't enjoy. But yeah, I think I could give it a 3.
I don't even know how solid my 3. I basically my rating system is very weak. It's like if I enjoyed it at all, it's gonna get a 3. Like
Yes.
no, that's where I'm at. 'Cause I'm like, it takes me like not finishing a book or like really, really hating it for me to give it less than a 3. So I'm like, if I enjoyed it at all, I'm gonna keep it and display it, which means it deserves to be a 3. And if I don't give it a 3, I don't put it on my bookshelf.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't keep it. Voila.
I think the only book that I've ever given 1 star was called Secret of the Devil Vine, and it was literally just the worst ever book I've ever read ever.
It doesn't sound exciting. I did not make it through this. Beautiful and Damned. I'm gonna try again before I get on it, but they were just so mean and petty, and I'm like, not right now.
I don't have time for this.
I don't have the emotions to deal with your bullshittery, so.
Alright, so then East of Eden, we are reading this in April and May, so I imagine that our show for that will be sometime between May and July, based on how mine and Casey's schedules work.
So yeah, if y'all are still watching the video at this point, YouTube, there's 55 chapters, and some of the chapters have like sub chapters, but there's 55 numbered chapters. So the loose goal, I think, just so we can make sure we actually try our best to read it between April and May, is a chapter a day, and there'll be like an extra 6 days. So if you read a few more chapters, you have like on a weekend day, you have a few days in the week you don't need to read a chapter, kind of thing. Also, I will probably read this book much faster than that, so I will try and go slow and only read 1 chapter.
Oh, so I wanted to ask before we went, because like my edition is old and didn't come with a dust cover and has no back matter. So I was gonna ask you, what is the Casey summary of East of Eden? What am I getting ready to get into?
Well, let me analyze what the dust jacket here says. I'm very bad at book summaries, so we're going to take my brain. Every time I'm doing like a book haul or a wrap up, I'm like, what is this book actually about? I have no idea. Did I read it? Yes. Do I know what it's about? No.
I love Princess's booktube videos for that reason, because sometimes she'll just be like, you know what? I don't know what this book is about. Going in blind. I'm happy about it. Fuck you. Like, cool. So we are allowed to do that in booktube.
Oh, I actually got a video that I think should have gone out around 9 o'clock, so a few minutes ago. Because my birthday is this month, I'm doing the 25 books I read before I'm 25, most of which are already on TBR videos that I've already posted. But moral of the story is, I'm like, I don't know anything about this book. Moving on. That was the whole idea. You know. Anyways, East of Eden is a retelling in a way of like the fall from the grace of God. So it's versus like when you're like outside of the Garden of Eden, like after you've already been kicked out, this is why y'all are horrible people and whatnot. But basically it's set in California, and you're following the Trasks and the Hamiltons as like the 2 main families. Most of John Steinbeck's books are set in the Salinas Valley area in California because that's where he is from, so this one is no exception to that. And basically the Hamiltons, I believe, are loosely modeled after his own family in terms of like their characters and like they're nice, sane people who like worked hard and did things. The Trasks, on the other hand, are not messes, and they're the like so basically, sorry, there's been tangents in my brain, but basically we're following these 2 families as they try and like build up their homesteads in this valley in Salinas, California during the like.
Is this like a
It's
Great
not
Depression?
no, so it's not directly in the middle of like when everybody else was going out exploring. It's a little bit after that, so there is some like established small cities and towns and stuff.
So it's
I
like
think it's
post Gold Rush.
yes, exactly. Basically, what the book itself says is that set in the rich farmland of California's Salinas Valley, the sprawling and often brutal novel follows the intertwined destinies of two families, the Deaths and the Hamiltons, whose generations help helplessly reenact the fall of Adam and Eve and the poisonous rivalry of Cain and Abel. But so there is a lot of like biblical references in this book. There's a few characters that are absolute psychopaths. They're amazing. I hate them. Like, such a good villain way that you just don't expect to come out of like the rest of the story. I'm very interested to see what you think about Kathy.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm talking about when you meet her, but honestly, I think one of my favorite characters is their farmhand, actually named Lee. He's so wise, such good depth, and a lot of the most beautiful words come out of his mouth. But it's hard to really. It's very difficult to describe this book, as you can probably gather. But I love it. It's a lot. I'm excited to see what you think about it.
Yay! Okay, so then I led the discussion on this one because I had read King Arthur, which means next time Casey is going to be leading the discussion on East of Eden. We're going to be posting this on both of our channels. Casey is at Casey Is Booked, and I am at Katie Reads Books.
Woo!
Woo! Here's to Steinbeck.
This has been fun. It's hard for me to convince people to read these kind of books, so I appreciate that you were willing to do this adventure with me.
Yeah,
I enjoyed
absolutely.
wherever the heck the other book went. All right, King Arthur.
I was gonna say, did it jump off the shelf again? Cool. Well, yeah. So, like, depending on how East of Eden goes, maybe we can do some more Steinbeck adventuring together.